Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master, and today we're talking about a module for TSR's old Marvel superheroes role playing game called Murderworld, which was an adventure for the Fantastic Four. And this, by the way, takes place after the events of Secret Wars, when She Hulk took Ben Grimm's place on the team. But before we get into it, smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications, and be sure to leave us a comment. We've got an awesome community here, and it's all thanks to you. So thank you so much for being here. With all that said, let's dive in. The prologue to this one takes place in 1984 in New York City at the Baxter Building. Sue and Johnny are being interviewed on the residential level. Reed is conducting a maintenance program on the negative zone portal monitors. She Hulk is in the gym working out. And Franklin Richards, who's 16 years old now, is playing video games with Herbie the robot, who Reed built to be Franklin's friend when he was just a little boy. Sue and Johnny are being interviewed by a college student named Sally Flack, who's working towards a doctorate in sociology. Her thesis is about siblings who live together as adults. This obviously includes such famous siblings as the Human Torch and his sister, who used to go by the name Invisible Girl, but these days has started going by the moniker Invisible Woman. Sally is wearing a sensible suit and skirt and a pair of oversized amber bracelets that rattle annoyingly as she writes. She takes notes on a yellow legal pad and is using a tape recorder to record their conversation for later. She seems genuinely interested in the Fantastic Four's past and Sue and Johnny's part in it. Johnny flirts with Sally, and she mentions that when the Fantastic Four debuted all the way back in 1961, she wasn't even born yet. So, for the first time in his life, Johnny Storm feels old, and his sister reminds him that her son is now the age that Johnny was when the team started. After about 5 minutes of interviewing the heroes, an armored, caped figure flies past the window, headed for the roof, and it looks like the late Doctor Doom, who recently died in the Secret Wars. Seconds later, an explosion rocks the building, and the hangar bay alarms howl to life. So the various members of the Fantastic Four contact each other over communicators that Reed Richards built that basically work like a modern day cell phone. Sue and Johnny say they're headed to the roof. Reed and She Hulk drop what they're doing and head towards the explosion too. Franklin asks if he should head up, but Reed tells him to find his little sister Valeria and keep her safe. So that's what he and Herbie do. Meanwhile, in the hangar bay, what seems to be Doctor Doom has ripped open the hangar bay doors, shorted out the security monitors, and is currently trashing some valuable machinery. When Mr. Fantastic enters the room, Doom throws the Fantasticar at him. Reed may be old now, but he's still sharp. He sees this Doombot doing things the real Doctor Doom couldn't do. And of course, mindless violence was never really Doom's style. Reed tries to subdue him, but loses, as do the others. One by one, the Fantastic Four is knocked out. The Doombot was originally built by the real Doctor Doom, but recently it was rebuilt by Arcade, so it obeys him now. The Doombot radios Arcade's helicopter, which comes and loads up the Fantastic Four to transport them to the abandoned Coney Island amusement park, where they are then taken through secret passageways down into a place called Murderworld, which brings us to the main plot. Mr. Fantastic awakens to find himself in the highest tower of a medieval castle under siege. He looks out a window and sees foul creatures in gleaming black armor. Giants stride through their ranks, wielding mighty clubs and spears. Tower trembles as the main gate is shattered by the giants, and the furious horde streams into the keep. Behind him is a sword wedged into an anvil. Diamonds gleam on its hilt, and a voice from nowhere declares, "To defeat your enemies, you must unsheath the sword of ancients." Reed thinks he's in some sort of simulation, so he ignores the sword and the invading goblin army and instead breaks through the wall and shorts out the system. The androids all shut down, and the projection of the world outside the castle fades away. When it fades, entry hatches appear on the wall adjacent to the various ducts. Reed examines Arcade's goblins. In actuality, they are his instant androids, and they are incredibly well made. Reed figures Arcade can hear him, so he speaks out loud, telling Arcade that his creations are amazing and he should put his talents to better use than this. Then Reed leaves. Elsewhere, in the sprawling subterranean Murderworld complex, the Human Torch wakes up at the base of an Aztec step pyramid. The steady beat of many drums can be heard, and the three tiers of the pyramid are manned by robots in Aztec guard, wielding large fire axes. At the top of the pyramid, the robotic high chief, flanked by two drummers, is conducting a sacrificial ritual. Behind the high priest, the sacrifice is tied to a large circular stone. The sacrifice is Frankie Ray, the heroine better known as Nova, and Johnny Storm's ex-wife. Johnny has no idea he's in a simulation, and he has no idea that this fake Frankie Ray is one of Arcade's androids. After all, they're all like Terminators in that they are very lifelike facsimiles. And as such, Johnny wrongly assumes that the Doombot was the real Doctor Doom and that he must have used sorcery to transport the Fantastic Four into the past. He also assumes Doom gave the Aztecs fire axes to kill Johnny with as a weird fireman joke. Johnny, therefore, tries to go easy on the robots, only wanting to knock them out and not kill them. So the fight goes badly for the Human Torch, who's holding back. Despite this, he manages to rescue the Frankie Ray android, only for it to literally explode in his face, which seems to be a Nova joke. Elsewhere, Sue Richards wakes up and her head is spinning. She is in a featureless room, and at the far end is a door marked exit in warm, friendly colors. Moving around the room are four tank robots with the heads of bulls. Instead of horns, each minnow tank sprouts a pair of heavy guns. So Sue begins to move, and as soon as she crosses a boundary on the floor, a new force field wall comes into being. As she moves, the walls change, so both Sue and the minnow tanks must navigate the labyrinth. Sue becomes invisible, but the robots have heat detectors and still know where she's at. Sue at first puts a bubble around herself, protecting her from the minnow tank's weapons. But then she changes tactics, placing a bubble around the tank, then crushing it. Pretty soon, the invisible woman has destroyed each robot, found her way through the maze, and makes her way to the exit. Elsewhere, She Hulk wakes up in a desert near a hawk shaped starfighter. Suddenly, the air is split by a high pitched whine as another starfighter swoops low out of the east. Some nearby rocks are reduced to rubble under the enemy starfighter's guns. The starfighter banks left, and She Hulk sees the pilot. It's Ben Grimm. She Hulk gets in her starfighter and starts to dogfight her holographic opponent. Fight is pretty even, but the enemy ship can be destroyed in 4 hits, while Jen's ship needs to be hit 5 times. However, each time an enemy is destroyed, a replacement enemy is spawned. And after a while, Jen's ship is destroyed while she's in space. But these are holograms, and the room she's in has air in it. So Jen realizes she's not really in the vacuum of outer space. She's in a simulation. So she starts feeling around the thing she's standing on until she feels a seam. Then she starts ripping the holodeck apart. Once she finds her way out, she meets up with the other 3 members of the Fantastic Four, and the Human Torch is in bad shape, so much so that Jen carries him. They navigate the seemingly endless tunnels and corridors of Murderworld until they reach a control room, where they see what appears to be Arcade and his 2 assistants. But these too are androids rigged to explode. Thanks to this explosion, the Human Torch is knocked out and needs a doctor right away. So Jen tears through the ceiling until they come up on an island. In the distance, they can see the Statue of Liberty. Jen then has Sue in one arm and Johnny in the other. Reed holds onto her back, and Jen leaps towards the mainland. Reed then shapeshifts into a backpack hang glider sort of thing, and they glide towards the nearest emergency room where Johnny is in critical condition. When the remaining 3 heroes return to the Baxter building, they find 2 villains there: the Wizard and his current partner in crime, the Trapster. Wizard, as it turns out, hired Arcade to keep the Fantastic Four busy while he examined Reed's negative zone portal. Wizard is hoping to make one of his own, but gets caught in the act by Franklin Richards and his pal Herbie. Franklin has power duplication, so honestly, defeating these 2 villains is child's play for the boy who may one day grow up to become Galactus. As a brief aside, we saw that in Earth X issue number 2 from 1999, and by a bizarre coincidence, I had come up with that very same idea about a year earlier due to the similarity in their powers and them both having a connection to the Fantastic Four. Anyways, so while Johnny Storm is in the hospital, his ex-wife, Nova, aka Frankie Ray Storm, brings their daughter to come visit him. Johnny and Frankie begin to reconcile, and Frankie, who used to be known as Human Torch 3, offers to fill in for Johnny on the team while he's making a recovery, which prompts Franklin to suggest that the name of the team is a problem because sometimes they have 3 members, sometimes they have 5 members, and Franklin thinks they should rebrand themselves. Franklin suggests they rename themselves Fantastic Force. Reed suggests Future Foundation, and Sue suggests the First Family. They can't decide and agree that they will worry about it later. Which brings us to the epilogue. Speaking of things to worry about later, the Skrulls attack the Baxter building. As it turns out, Sally Flack was a Skrull spy, and those annoying bracelets she was wearing were gadgets that prevented the security system from figuring out what she really was. The Skrulls are under the command of Captain Scott Eel. His plan is to steal a time machine that Dr. Doom built years ago, which is in the Baxter building for safekeeping. Anyways, so the 6 heroes, Frankie Ray, Franklin Richards, Herbie, Jennifer Walters, Reed Richards, and Sue Richards, all fight the Skrulls and win, so the time machine remains safe. As the Fantastic Four are cleaning up after the battle, Reed checks the negative zone portal, and to his shock, he sees Blastar in there, dangerously close to the other side of the door. And what's stranger still is Reed sees Ben Grimm in the negative zone alongside the Tinkerer. Reed doesn't know what's going on or how they got there. He assembles the heroes and they prepare to rescue the ever loving blue eyed thing. But that's a story for another day. And that was it for our version of TSR's old Murder World adventure for the Marvel Superheroes role playing game. I remember reading this as a kid and I was very confused by it. As an adult, I get what they were going for, not wanting things to be too simplistic, so they have multiple things happening all at once. Depending on who's playing, though, in my humble opinion, this can come off as chaotic and kind of a disjointed mess. For instance, some of that stuff with Blastar was supposed to happen in the beginning while the Doombot was attacking. Also, at that same time, She-Hulk was supposed to have problems in the gym because the hydraulic press she used for her bench press exercises was built for Ben Grimm, who the module says is stronger than she. So while the Doombot trashes the hangar bay, all these other random things are going wrong all at once. And to me, it just makes the adventure start off with a lot of chaos. So when I ran it, I focused only on the Doombot. Had the Fantastic Four beaten it, then you go on to chapter 2 in the module, which has them attacked by robotic water towers. And like I've said in some other videos, that sort of thing feels very Silver Age to me. Now, to be clear, I don't hate it, but I think it would work better in a bygone era. When you are trying to establish a certain tone or a certain feel for the game, this can be a problem. And like I've said before, the late 80s gave us Venom, the Gray Hulk, and characters like Wolverine and Ghost Rider surged in popularity. Things got dark. So to butt that era right up against killer water towers just felt off to me. So I didn't rig the numbers. I kept the Doombot as is, but thankfully he abducted the heroes and we skipped the water tower chapter. Likewise, at the end of the game, the fight with the Skrulls is supposed to happen at the same time as an unrelated fight with Wizard and Trapster. So again, just my own personal preference, we thought it would be better to break it up into two separate things. Speaking of things, Ben Grimm being in the negative zone was something I added. That was us bringing him home after he stayed on Battle World at the end of Secret Wars. I could do a video about that, but think of all the teams there are in DC and Marvel Comics. Multiply that by 12 a year, which would be how many issues, right? And now imagine me uploading that many videos for each year between 1984 and today, right? So I kind of pick and choose what I do and don't cover. I figure that what's important are the big moments like Secret Wars or the Crisis, or things that explain something that I think will be important later on. Like recently, I've been showing a budding romance between Nightcrawler, aka Kurt Wagner, and Shadowcat, aka Kitty Pryde. And the reason why is because one day they have a daughter in our game world named Nightcat that is one of my wife's favorite characters to play. Likewise, in this adventure, I mentioned Johnny Storm and Frankie Ray having a daughter because that little girl will be Human Torch 4 later on in our game world. So, all that said, we thought this one was interesting, and we hope that you did too. If so, as always, smash like, make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell, and leave us a comment. From all of us here at the longest running superhero role playing game on earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.